There is a feature hiding inside every Chevy V8 made in the last 15 years that has destroyed more engines than any recall in GM history. Over 28,000 complaints have been filed with the Federal Safety Administration. A class action lawsuit is still going strong, and GM still puts it in every single truck they sell today. Number 8. The Auto Start-Stop System. If you own a 2019 or newer Silverado, or a 2021 or newer Tahoe or Suburban, your engine shuts itself off at every single red light, stop sign, and drive-through window. GM calls it fuel savings. I call it a headache. Here is the problem. Every time that starter motor cranks your engine back to life, it is one more wear cycle on your starter and your battery. A traditional truck might see around 5,000 start cycles over its entire life. A truck with start-stop running in city traffic can hit 50,000 cycles or more. GM did use beefier starters with needle bearings to handle the extra load, and I will give them credit for that. But the real weak link is the battery. These trucks require an AGM battery, which runs $200 to $300 for a replacement. And according to industry testing data, those AGM batteries last 30 to 50% shorter in extreme heat or cold compared to regular driving conditions. So if you live somewhere with brutal summers or harsh winters, your battery lifespan takes a serious hit. The good news is this one has a cheap fix. An aftermarket start-stop disabler plugs into your dashboard for about $100 and remembers to turn the system off every time you start the truck. I personally think it is one of the best $100 upgrades you can put on a new Chevy. Now that first one is annoying, but this next feature hiding in older Chevy trucks can actually leave you stranded on the side of the highway. Number 7. The electronic throttle body. If you have ever been driving your Silverado, Tahoe, or Suburban and suddenly seen the words "reduced engine power" flash across your dashboard, you know exactly what I am talking about. Your truck goes from full power to barely crawling at maybe 15% throttle. It happens with zero warning, sometimes while merging onto a freeway, and it is terrifying. This affects the 2007 through 2011 generation the worst, especially the 4.8-liter, 5.3-liter, and 6.2-liter V8 engines. The throttle body uses an internal sensor that tracks how far the throttle plate is open. Over time, the resistance track inside that sensor degrades from constant heat cycling under the hood. Once it starts sending bad readings, the truck's computer panics and cuts power to protect the engine. But here is what I dug into that a lot of shops actually miss. The number one hidden cause is not the sensor itself. It is a broken wire conductor inside the insulation near the throttle body connector. The wire looks perfectly fine on the outside, but internally it is fractured. You can wiggle the connector and the truck runs fine for a week, then it happens again. The ground wire crimped at the back of the left cylinder head is the most common culprit. GM eventually acknowledged the throttle sensor issue with a special coverage program extending repairs to 10 years or 120,000 miles on the sensor cover. But if your truck is past that window, a new throttle body assembly runs about $300 to $500 installed. If you thought the throttle body was expensive, this next one makes that look like pocket change. Number 6. The 3.6-liter V6 timing chain. The Chevy Traverse, Equinox 5.6, and several other GM crossovers use a 3.6-liter V6 engine that is known for one very expensive problem. The timing chains stretch, and they stretch way earlier than they should. A timing chain on any engine should easily last 250,000 miles or more. On this particular V6, owners are seeing chain stretch and failure between 60,000 and 100,000 miles. The root cause is a combination of inadequate chain material and oil spray ports inside the engine that are too small to properly lubricate the chain guides. When the chains stretch far enough, the engine timing goes off, and you start getting misfire codes and a check engine light. If you ignore it long enough, the chain can skip teeth on the sprockets inside the engine, and that can bend valves. Now you are looking at catastrophic internal damage. The repair is brutal because of where GM put the chains. The engine has to come partially out of the vehicle. The shop has to drop the engine cradle, which means disconnecting the exhaust, the axle shafts, the transmission, and the engine mounts. You are looking at $2,500 to $4,500 for the complete job. I have seen more than a few Traverse owners just sell the vehicle once they get that quote. My tip if you own one of these, change your oil on time, every time, and use the manufacturer's specified weight. Good oil is the only thing keeping those chains alive longer. If you hear a rattle on cold startup that goes away after a few seconds, that is the early warning sign. Get it checked before the chains jump timing. But the timing chain issue at least gives you a warning sound. This next feature causes damage you cannot hear or see until it is already a problem. Number 5. Direct injection without port injection. Every newer Chevy truck with a V8 engine like the 5.3-liter and the 6.2-liter uses direct injection only. That means the fuel injectors spray gasoline directly into the combustion chamber at extremely high pressure, instead of spraying it onto the back of the intake valves like older engines did. The benefit is better fuel economy and more horsepower. The downside is that nothing is washing the intake valves anymore. Oil vapors from the crankcase ventilation system and exhaust residue from the recirculation system slowly coat the back of those intake valves with hard carbon deposits. On the old-style port injection engines, gasoline constantly washed over the valves and kept them clean. With direct injection, that cleaning mechanism is completely gone. By 70,000 to 80,000 miles, the carbon buildup starts causing rough idle, cold start hesitation, and misfires. Some trucks show symptoms as early as 40,000 miles with heavy city driving. And here is what really frustrates me. Other manufacturers like Toyota and Ford recognized this problem and added port injectors alongside the direct injectors specifically to keep the valves clean. GM chose not to do that on their truck engines. The only real fix is walnut shell media blasting, where a technician removes the intake manifold and blasts crushed walnut shells against the valves to scrub the carbon off. It costs $400 to $800 per service and needs to be repeated every 60,000 to 80,000 miles for the life of the truck. Chemical intake cleaners and fuel additives are basically useless here because the fuel never touches the valves in the first place. Now, remember that engine killer I mentioned at the very beginning of this video? We have finally arrived, and it is worse than you think. Number 4. Active fuel management and dynamic fuel management cylinder deactivation. This is the single most destructive feature General Motors has ever put inside a truck engine. It affects every Chevy V8 going back to 2007 in its older form, called AFM. Starting in 2019, General Motors introduced an even more aggressive version called DFM. The idea is simple. When your truck is cruising on the highway and does not need full power, the system shuts down some cylinders to save fuel. It uses special hydraulic lifters with tiny internal locking pins that disconnect from the camshaft. When those pins get damaged from oil pressure drops or bad timing, the lifter collapses. A collapsed lifter bends the push rod and then grinds the camshaft lobe flat. Metal fragments circulate through the oil and damaged bearings, cylinder walls, and oil passages. One small lifter failure can snowball into total engine destruction. On older AFM trucks, failures typically hit between 50,000 and 130,000 miles. The newer DFM version made it worse by using 17 different deactivation patterns instead of just one, meaning all 16 lifters cycle constantly. Some DFM trucks built in late 2020 saw collapses at less than 13,000 miles. I was reading through the Silverado forums, and the number of owners dealing with this exact failure is staggering. Repair costs range from $2,500 for just the lifters, up to $7,000 when the camshaft is destroyed, which it usually is. If metal contaminated the entire engine, a full replacement runs $8,500 to $17,000. There is an active class action lawsuit covering 2014 through present model years, and the court denied General Motors' effort to break the case apart in early 2026. My honest recommendation: get an AFM or DFM disabler device for about $130. It prevents the system from activating and can save your lifters before they fail. I personally think it is one of the smartest aftermarket purchases you can make on any Chevy V8. Speaking of expensive GM engineering decisions, let us talk about what is going on inside the transmission. Number 3, the 8-speed automatic transmission. The 8-speed automatic used in 2015 through 2019, Silverados, Sierras, Tahoes, and Suburbans developed a torque converter shutter so widespread that owners gave it a nickname: the Chevy Shake. The torque converter uses a clutch that locks the converter to the transmission for better efficiency. GM used a smaller converter than the previous 6-speed transmission and programmed it to lock up as early as first gear. Over time, the friction material inside the converter glazes over from the constant engagement, and the truck starts shuddering at light throttle between 30 and 50 miles per hour. It feels like driving over rumble strips on the highway. GM released a service bulletin recommending a complete fluid exchange with 20 quarts of a revised synthetic fluid. That flush costs $400 to $1,000. It works for some trucks, but for many it is just a temporary bandage. When the shutter returns, the torque converter needs replacement at $1,800 to $4,000. Replacement is expensive. A class action lawsuit achieved certification covering over 514,000 owners across 26 states. Court documents revealed that GM estimated a fleet-wide fluid flush would cost $592 million and chose not to issue a proactive recall. If you own one of these trucks, get the fluid changed with the correct revised specification before the shutter starts. Prevention is a fraction of the cost of a converter replacement. If you are finding this helpful, go ahead and hit subscribe. I cover Chevy maintenance tips and problems like this every week, so you can keep your truck running longer without getting blindsided at the repair shop. Now let us keep going because these last two are serious. Number 2, the diesel exhaust fluid system on the Duramax diesel. If you own a 2017 or newer Silverado or Sierra Heavy Duty with the Duramax diesel, your truck has a diesel exhaust fluid system called DEF that can shut the engine down to a crawl with almost no warning. The DEF tank uses internal heating elements to keep the fluid from freezing in cold weather. The problem is that one of those heating elements tends to burn out, usually between 45,000 and 95,000 miles. When the truck detects a heater failure, it triggers a countdown sequence mandated by federal emissions rules. First, you get a warning message on the dashboard, then a 200-mile countdown, then your speed gets limited to 65 miles per hour, and if you keep driving, the truck eventually limits you to 5 miles per hour, not a typo, 5 miles per hour, on a $60,000 diesel truck. Replacing the DEF tank assembly costs between $1,600 and $2,400, and the truck is essentially undrivable until it is fixed. GM addressed the root cause in mid-2023 production with ceramic-coated heater elements that are far more durable, but if your truck was built before that, you are running on borrowed time with the original heaters. If you drive a Duramax and you see that first diesel exhaust fluid warning, do not wait. Get the tank inspected immediately. That 200-mile countdown goes fast when you are trying to find a dealer with the part in stock. And finally, this last one is not just about money, it is a genuine safety concern. Number 1, frame rust from a defective factory coating. GM trucks ride on a heavy steel frame that needs a protective wax coating to survive road salt and moisture. For years, a third-party supplier applied that coating at the factory. The problem is that they did not properly prep the metal surface first. Without proper preparation, the wax does not bond. It peels off in sheets, leaving bare steel exposed to the elements. A GM Technical Service Bulletin covers 2011 through 2024 Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, and Suburban frames. One owner documented rust eating through the frame of a 2024 Silverado at only 16,000 miles. Another received a repair estimate over $15,000 on a 2014 Silverado, with the shop saying the frame was barely holding together. What frustrates me is how GM handled it compared to Toyota. When the Tacoma had a similar frame rust issue, Toyota issued a full recall with free frame replacements. GM issued only a service bulletin, no recall, no free repair, and coverage is limited to the original warranty that most affected trucks have already exceeded. If you own a Chevy truck in a Salt Belt state, get underneath it at least once a year and inspect the frame. Look for wax coating that is peeling away from the steel. If you catch it early, a rust converter treatment and quality undercoating can slow the damage significantly. Here is the big takeaway from everything we covered today. These are not random defects or bad luck. Every single one of these problems traces back to a specific engineering decision General Motors made to save money, squeeze out better fuel economy numbers, or hit an emissions target. The good news is that most of them have preventive steps you can take right now to protect your truck. If you want to see the top maintenance mistakes that Chevy owners make that speed up these failures even faster, that video is on screen now. I'll see you in the next one.